It's the dead of winter in the American frontier, 1850s Texas, where temperatures plunge below freezing, winds howl like angry wolves across the barren plains, and soldiers huddle in makeshift shelters that feel more like iceboxes than homes, their breath visible in the dim light of sputtering fires. Fingers numb from the cold that seeps through every crack and crevice, and just when you think survival is a gamble against nature's fury, one man, a military officer no less, pitches a bizarre, cone-shaped tent that looks like something borrowed from Native American nomads. And not only does it stand firm against blizzards that would topple regular army barracks, but it keeps its occupants toasty warm, a staggering 45 degrees Fahrenheit hotter inside than the sturdy log cabins nearby, which were supposed to be the pinnacle of frontier engineering, leaving everyone scratching their heads in disbelief as this strange invention rewrites the rules of winter survival overnight, proving that sometimes the simplest ideas, drawn from ancient wisdom, can outsmart the most rugged modern builds. And if that doesn't hook you, consider this shocking fact. This tent didn't need to save lives. On the frontier it changed military campaigns forever. But how on earth did it pull off such a thermal miracle without modern insulation or fancy gadgets? Let's dive into the story of Henry Sibley, the man behind this revolutionary shelter, starting with the brutal realities of life on the edge of civilization that inspired his genius. Because understanding the desperation of those frozen nights is key to appreciating why his tent was just clever. It was a lifesaver that humbled the proud log cabin builders of the era. Back in the mid-19th century, the American West was a wild, unforgiving place where settlers, soldiers, and explorers battled not just hostile forces, but the elements themselves, with winters so harsh that frostbite claimed toes and fingers as casually as a card game. And the standard shelter, a log cabin, seemed like the obvious choice. Built from felled trees stacked horizontally, chinked with mud or moss to seal gaps, and topped with a sod roof for extra protection. These cabins were symbols of permanence and strength, housing families or troops with their thick walls promising warmth from a central fireplace. But here's the dirty secret. They leaked heat like a sieve, with cold air infiltrating through shrinking wood as temperatures dropped, creating drafts that whistled through the rooms. And the square corners trapped pockets of icy air, while hot smoke from inefficient chimneys escaped straight up, wasting precious fuel, meaning folks inside often shivered near the fire, while the rest of the space remained chilly, sometimes with temperature gradients of 30 degrees from floor to ceiling, and firewood was scarce on the plains, forcing constant chopping that exhausted already weary men, leading to stories of entire patrols succumbing to hypothermia because their solid cabins couldn't hold the heat worth a damn, especially when compared to the mobile lifestyles of Native American tribes like the Comanche, who roamed the same lands in teepees, conical structures made from buffalo hides stretched over poles that somehow stayed warm and dry no matter the storm, allowing them to move with the seasons without the burden of heavy logs. And it was during his posting on the Texas frontier from 1850 to 1854 that Lieutenant Henry Sibley, a West Point graduate born in 1816 in Louisiana, observed these indigenous designs up close, befriending local tribes and studying their survival tactics, realizing that their teepees weren't primitive at all, but ingeniously engineered for efficiency, with smoke holes that vented perfectly in shapes that shed wind and snow like water off a duck-ass back, sparking an idea in his mind to adapt this for the U.S. Army, which was struggling with cumbersome rectangular tents that collapsed in high winds and offered zero warmth in cold snaps. And by 1856, Sibley had patented his invention. But what exactly made his version so special? And how did it achieve that mind-blowing 45-degree advantage over the vaunted log cabins that everyone swore by? To really grasp this, we need to look closer at the problems with traditional shelters. Log cabins, for all their sturdiness, had high thermal mass, meaning the wood absorbed heat slowly and released it just as sluggishly. So a warming one up took hours, and once cold, it stayed that way. Plus, the flat roofs accumulated snow, adding weight that could cause collapses. And pests, like termites or rot from moisture, turned them into maintenance nightmares over time. Whereas native teepees used lightweight materials that dried quickly, and their aerodynamic form deflected gales instead of fighting them, reducing structural stress, and Sibley drawing from this aim to create a hybrid that combined military practicality with nomadic wisdom. But he didn't stop at copying. He innovated, adding features like a reinforced canvas that was treated for waterproofing, far better than hides that could stiffen in the cold, and his design allowed for quick setup by a small team, under 30 minutes even in bad weather, compared to days or weeks for a cabin which required axes, saws, and a whole crew, making it ideal for an army on the move. And early trials in the 1850s showed promise, with reports from Fort Belknap noting how the tent withstood 50 miles per hour winds, while nearby structures creaked and groaned. But the true test came in measuring that heat retention, where rudimentary thermometers of the day revealed interiors holding steady at levels that felt almost luxurious, prompting questions about physics. Why did the cone shape matter so much? It turns out the geometry minimized the ratio of surface area to volume, a principle we now call the isoperimetric quotient, where spheres and cones lose less heat than cubes for the same space enclosed. And with no right angles to create dead zones, air flowed freely, enhanced by the central fires up, pulling in oxygen and expelling smoke efficiently, avoiding the carbon monoxide risks that killed many in poorly ventilated cabins. And Sibley's attention to detail extended to the floor, often raised on a slight platform of sod or blankets to insulate from ground frost, adding another layer of warmth. But as word spread, skeptics dismissed it as a gimmick, too flimsy for real frontiersmen who trusted logs over fabric. Yet the data didn't lie, with one account from an 1857 scout describing a night where outside mercury hit -10 degrees Fahrenheit, but inside the Sibley, it was a balmy 35 degrees Fahrenheit, while a log hut nearby barely reached -5 degrees Fahrenheit despite constant stoking, a difference that could mean life or death for exhausted troops. And this edge came without extra cost. Tents were cheaper to produce en masse, using cotton duck canvas from mills back east, shipped via wagon trains, versus sourcing local timber that varied in quality. And Sibley's patent, number 14,740, detailed these advantages, positioning it as a must-have for the expanding nation. But looming on the horizon was a conflict that would both elevate and betray his creation, leaving us to ponder, would the Sibley tent prove its mettle in the chaos of war, or fade into obscurity like so many forgotten ideas? Hold on, because the next chapter reveals how this strange shelter became a battlefield staple, teasing even greater surprises in its enduring impact. Now, picture Sibley in his workshop, sketching out what would become known as the Sibley Tenta conical marvel, standing about 12 feet high and 18 feet in diameter at the base, supported not by a forest of poles, but a single central iron tripod that held everything up like a steadfast sentinel, with heavy canvas walls pegged down around the perimeter using 24 stakes, eliminating the need for guy ropes that tangled in the wind, and at the top, an adjustable cowl or cap that allowed smoke to escape while keeping rain and snow out, regardless of which way the gusts blew, making it far more weatherproof than the floppy A-frame tents the Army used before, which flapped like sails in a storm and let in every drop of moisture. But the real magic happened inside, where Sibley incorporated a small conical stove later, called the Sibley stove, placed right in the center under the tripod, its pipe venting straight up through the top opening, allowing a safe fire that warmed the entire space evenly without the smoke buildup that plagued cabins with their side chimneys. And because the tent's shape had no corners or flat walls, heat circulated naturally via convection, rising warm air, pulling in cooler drafts from the bottom edges in a gentle loop that distributed warmth uniformly from floor to peak, unlike log cabins where hot air pooled uselessly at the ceiling while feet froze on the dirt floor, creating uncomfortable layers that forced people to huddle close to the hearth. And get this, the Sibley tent could comfortably sleep 12 to 20 men in a circle around the stove, their heads toward the walls and feet toward the fire, maximizing space and shared body heat, all while weighing just 40 to 50 pounds when packed, a fraction of what a log cabin required in materials, meaning troops could carry it on wagons or mules for rapid deployment, a game changer for mobile campaigns on the vast plains where building permanent structures wasn't feasible. And when it came to that 45-degree edge, it boiled down to thermal efficiency. The conical design minimized surface area exposed to the cold, reducing heat loss by about 30% compared to a square cabin of similar volume. Plus, the canvas, while thin, trapped a layer of still air against the interior that acted as natural insulation. And with the stove's radiant heat bouncing off the sloped walls back into the space instead of escaping through cracks. Tests during the Utah expedition in 1857 to 1858 showed interiors staying around 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit even when outside temps hit 20 degrees below zero, a difference of up to 45 degrees warmer than nearby log barracks that struggled to break 25 degrees inside despite burning twice the wood, because cabins' thick logs actually conducted cold inward like a bridge, and their large air volumes demanded more fuel to heat, whereas the Sibley's compact 1,000 cubic feet or so warmed up in minutes, saving precious resources and keeping soldiers healthier and more alert, with fewer cases of illness from damp chills. And to delve deeper, the stove itself was a breakthrough made of sheet iron. It was lightweight yet durable, with a conical shape that mirrored the tent, optimizing fuel burn by concentrating heat, and users could feed it small sticks or buffalo chips, abundant on the plains, rather than large logs that cabins needed, extending burn times to hours on minimal supply, and ventilation was key. The adjustable cap could be turned to face away from wind, preventing downdrafts that extinguished fires. A common cabined woe where chimneys drew poorly in gusts, and Sibley's design even included optional liners for extreme cold, like adding felt or blankets inside the canvas for double insulation, boosting that temperature delta further. And during the Utah War, where Mormon settlers clashed with federal forces in snowy mountains, the tents proved invaluable, allowing Brigham Young's pursuers to camp high without freezing. With one officer's journal noting how the Sibleys saved our campaign from disaster. S-log huts would have bogged down logistics, and post-expedition, the Army ordered thousands, with Sibley negotiating royalties of $5 per tent, dreaming of riches from his clever adaptation. But personal ambition clashed with national turmoil. As a descendant of Confederate sympathizers, Sibley felt torn when secession loomed, and in 1861, he resigned his commission to join the South, a move that cost him dearly, as the Union seized his patent without compensation, producing over 40,000 units for their armies while he led doomed invasions in the Southwest, using makeshift shelters that paled in comparison, highlighting the irony of his brainchild arming his enemies. And this twist raises intriguing questions about loyalty and legacy. How did the tent perform in the grueling marshes of Gettysburg or Antietam, where winter camps tested in rots? And what adaptations did soldiers make on the fly to push that 45-degree advantage even further in the face of wartime shortages? The answers lie in the war's untold stories, building suspense for how this invention transcended its creator's fate, hinting at broader lessons in cultural exchange and resilience that continue to resonate in unexpected ways. As the Civil War raged from 1861 to 1865, the Sibley tent became a quiet hero on the Union side, with over 44,000 units issued to federal troops, transforming camp life from miserable endurance tests into somewhat bearable respites, where soldiers could dry their boots by the stove after muddy marshes, share stories in the warm glow without shivering, and even conduct strategy sessions in relative comfort, far better than the Confederate forces who, ironically, led by Sibley himself in campaigns like the New Mexico invasion, resorted to inferior shelters that left them exposed and fatigued, contributing to defeats like the Battle of Glorieta Pass in 1862, where cold nights sapped morale. And beyond the war, the tent's influence spread to explorers, miners, and settlers pushing westward during the gold rushes and homestead eras, with prospectors in the Rockies adopting modified versions stuffed with hay for extra insulation, mirroring those frontier tricks that kept interiors 45 degrees toastier than drafty cabins during blizzards. As anecdotal reports from the 80s and 70s Montana territories describe tents maintaining 65 degrees inside while log homes dipped to 20 degrees. All thanks to that efficient convection and minimal heat loss, and even the British Army took notice, licensing a variant for their colonial outposts in cold climates like Canada and India, where it proved superior to traditional bell tents by allowing internal heating without fire risks. But Sibley's personal story took a tragic turn. He never profited from his invention, dying in poverty in 1886 after a life of military misadventures and failed ventures. Yet his legacy endures in modern glamping and survival gear, where conical tents with stoves are prized for off-grid living, reminding us that true innovation often comes from humbly learning from others, like the Native Americans whose teepees inspired it all. And today, as we face our own climate challenges, perhaps rediscovering these low-tech marvels could help us build more sustainable shelters. But let us not forget the wartime adaptations that pushed the design further. Union soldiers often banked snow around the base for windbreaks, adding natural insulation that amplified the warmth. And some units sewn extra flaps for doors, reducing drafts, while Confederates, capturing a few, marveled at the efficiency but lacked the industry to replicate them at scale. And post-war, the U.S. cavalry used them in Indian wars, pursuing tribes like the Sioux across frozen prairies, where the tent's mobility echoed the very nomads they chased. A poetic justice in cultural loops, and explorers like John Wesley Powell in the 1870s. Colorado expeditions praised its compactness for river journeys, packing it on boats without bulk. And in the Klondike Gold Rush of 1897, stampeders hauled Sibley knockoffs over Chilkoot Pass, crediting the stove for surviving minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit nights that claimed many in crude cabins, where with scarcity meant freezing despite effort. Whereas the tent's frugal burn kept groups alive on scraps, and into the 20th century, it influenced early Antarctic explorers like Shackleton, who favored similar designs for base camps, appreciating the wind resistance that log structures couldn't match in polar gales. And modern analyses confirmed the science. Computational fluid dynamics models show the cone's airflow reduces turbulence, enhancing heat retention by 40% over rectangular forms, explaining that persistent 45-degree gap in environment. It was ahead of its time, using renewable canvas over deforestation heavy logs, aligning with today's eco-conscious building, but Sibley's downfall stemmed from broader issues. His Confederate service branded him a traitor, barring royalties. And alcohol struggles post-war led to obscurity. Yet his tense blueprint lives in patents for yurts and tippists sold at Ray, blending history with hobby. And as we reflect, it challenges us to question progress. Why did we abandon such efficient simplicity for energy-hungry homes? Perhaps in an era of tiny houses and climate migration, the Sibley offers blueprints for the future, urging us to borrow wisely from the past. So if this tale of a strange tent outsmarting the frontier has sparked your curiosity about history as hidden gems, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories that blend ingenuity with adventure, and drop a comment below sharing what ancient invention you'd love to see revived, maybe at inspire our next video. Thanks for watching, and stay warm out there.